Welcome everyone to the Homeschool Resource Conference hosted by Paradigm High School. We're so grateful to Paradigm High School. They're always so generous with their building and a real resource to the homeschooling community, and we're very grateful to them. And thankful also to the whole team that's put on this conference, to Jansen and Torianne and Charlotte and everyone who's been involved. Grateful that you're here today. We hope you have a really great experience. My name is Sam Martineau. I am the director of the Independent Education Program. More importantly, I am a teacher within that program, and I teach debate. To start today, I want to share an experience that highlights an idea, and honestly, I've felt qualms about, starting off with this, because the idea that I want to share is a little complex, maybe a little esoteric, and so I'll do my very best to stick with me. Don't give up on me, if you would please. Okay, so in my classes, I do these discussions with students. And the discussions, they are fun and they are engaging. I'll give them a philosophical question or a legal question, ask them to take a side. They have to decide what they think about that. They go back and forth with each other. More importantly, or at least just as importantly, they have to go back and forth with me. And I know a lot more about the subject than they do, so it really pushes their thinking. And it's a lot of fun. One of the discussions that I have with students regularly it's a little bit of a strange one. I only do it with my oldest students because it gets a little in the weeds philosophically, and it's a lot of fun. The discussion title is art real? And what that question really means is there an objective standard by which we could judge art? Is beauty truly just in the eye of the beholder? Or is beauty something in art that could be determined objectively? Is it just our own personal judgments, or is it... And to help, just to make sure, because I'm going to use these words a lot. So in case anyone's struggling with the terminology, a subjective measurement is something that is measured based on perception. It's contextual. It is seen through the eyes of a circumstance or a person. And an objective measurement is something that you would measure outside of a human framework, outside of the way that people see it. So for example, if I said it's 71 degrees Fahrenheit outside, then that would be objective. That's true whether I think it's true or not true. I could measure it, get it wrong, it would still be true. It is the temperature outside is the temperature outside. It doesn't depend upon my perception. If I say it's warm outside, that's subjective, right? It's dependent on what feels warm to me. If I say it's warm outside and it feels that way to me, that's true for me, but not true necessarily for someone who's going through something else and, it feels hot to them or cool or cold, or, maybe they are doing it in a different context. So objective, subjective. So the question really is beauty and the things that we love about art, are they objective or are they subjective? And people get passionate about this one. Students, man, they really get riled up by this circumstance. It's very interesting to see them come to it. But I noticed this trend over many years, and just the last round that I did it last year. This last round that I did it, I noticed something that was going on with students I thought was so interesting. Come on in, have a seat, you're good. What I noticed was that a lot of students were arguing that it was subjective, which is not too unique. I mean, lots of people argue it was subjective, but the reasoning why is what was really interesting. Essentially what they would say is, I can't tell which art is better than other art, so it has to be subjective. Someone would say, well, we could objectively say that this piece of art requires more skill than that piece of art. It's harder to accomplish, therefore it's better. And then the response would be something like, yeah, but this piece of music took more skill to write than this piece of music, but more people like this one. So how do you tell? And then someone would say, well, this one, people like this one better, and therefore it's better. And then someone else would say, yeah, but Picasso's works weren't appreciated for much later, so was it bad then good? And so essentially they would argue I can't tell what's right. I can't tell what is the better piece of art. Therefore, there is no better piece of art. And I don't know if that seems to make sense to you, but I would like to give a metaphor here and see if you can see it the way I'm seeing it. Let's imagine you had a 5-year-old and they had 1,000 puzzle pieces in front of them. And they were like, I can't figure this out. This puzzle, it can't be solved because I can't figure it out. Would you call that good logic? To say, oh, well, I don't know the answer, ergo, there is no answer. Or this task is too complex for me, therefore, this task can't be accomplished. There is no objectivity to the task. This pointed me to a really profound revelation that I've seen again and again since in students and in other places. I'll share one place that I saw it. But the revelation is this, and I hope, so this is a little esoteric, so I'm going to say it twice, listen carefully. The revelation is that complexity to immature minds presents as subjectivity. I'm going to say that again. Complexity presents to the immature mind as subjectivity. In other words, once a system or reasoning or things going on get really complex and hard to understand, instead of people saying, well, maybe, the appropriate answer for the 5-year-old at the puzzle is, I don't know if this can be solved. I'm not sure necessarily. I think maybe it can, maybe it can't. Here's my evidence for why I think maybe this will make a puzzle someday. But instead of saying that, the 5-year-old says, no answer. There is no solution. So complexity, when ideas start to get really complex, it starts to look like there is no objective answer to the question. And I want to give you an example of that. So I have students write reflections for me each year, twice a year. And in these reflections, one of the things I do is ask them to give me feedback. I want to read anonymously a piece of feedback a 15-year-old beginning student gave me this year. It was very interesting. I want you to pay attention. She says, the only advice that I would give him as a teacher is that he should be creating good people, not good speakers. Being one of the oldest in the class, she was 15, it was easy for me to discern a side and stay loyal to it. For the younger students who are trying to figure out who they are at that hard age, it is unhealthy for them to constantly be unable to find truth. Because in our discussions, they are persuaded that both sides are wrong and that there is no right side, which is false. And I don't think it's good for young teenagers. Now, I think that's an exceptionally interesting piece of feedback. For context, in these discussions, students don't get to know my opinions. I do have opinions, but they don't get to know. I will argue as aggressively as I can, from as many perspectives as I can, to push students' thinking. Essentially what I do is I take an issue that I think is a serious issue, a real issue that needs real consideration, an issue that I think is really complex. And I will say to students, look at this issue. Look at how complex it is. Look at how difficult it can be to come to a certain answer. Try to understand why there is so much conflict surrounding this issue. Try to get why it is that this issue bedevils humans over and over and over again. And then, after you have had that consideration, then try to come to a conclusion that you think is good. Because your snap decision, maybe it is what you're going to land on later. But if it is, it will be because you landed on it after deep, serious consideration of a complex issue. So how does that present to this 15-year-old? What does she say about that experience? Because in our discussions, they are persuaded that both sides are wrong and there is no right side, which is false. And I don't think that's good for young teenagers. Do you see what I'm saying? Complexity presents as subjectivity to an immature mind. I think I don't want to poke too much fun because this is all young students. Students are young and they're learning, but she's like, I'm 15, so I was able to handle it. But I mean, like, I can see the truth of the issue here and I know what's going on. I'm right, but I'm really worried about those 14-year-olds because maybe that's hard for them. I thought that was funny. She's got all the answers. But I mean, love the student anyway. I mean, this is what it means to be young, is you're still learning how to grasp complexity. Anyway, so this gets us to this need that I perceive in students and in people generally. People need a simple world. And the reason why is because the sense is, if the world is not simple, if it gets too complex, then we don't have any, then not only do we not have the answers, but the answers don't even exist. There's no bottom to the swimming pool. We could dive forever, we'd never touch bottom. And that's a terrifying concept. And so people need simplicity, because simplicity allows them this comforting assurance that answers exist. They can know the answers, and because they know the answers, they are right. And they don't have to ask any further questions. Okay, so now I want to pivot, asking if there is a better way, let me actually just put it this way. What I'm really asking is there a better way to see the world than I know everything or I know nothing? That there's no ground in between those two areas. I think that there is a meaningful philosophy and way of approaching life and education that allows you to not buy into that idea that either you know it all or there are no answers to be had. So now, with that being said, I would like to ask a question. That was a really long setup. Okay. The question is, why do we educate? What is the purpose of education? And maybe I want to say this particularly when we talk about things like the humanities, history and literature and public speaking and critical thinking, things that are less of hard sciences, where maybe the answer is, well, the purpose is for us to be able to do things scientifically or mathematically or in some engineering aspect that we couldn't do before. But what's the purpose of education in generally and maybe specifically in these fields? And the answer that I have often heard, or one answer that gets presented a lot, is to teach the truth. That the purpose of education is to teach the truth. And I think that's a great answer. It's a viable answer. It makes sense as an answer. To say we want to pass on true things to our students. But I want to point out that if that is the sum total of the answer, then I think we start to have some issues if this becomes the only answer to that question. And I want to say now that I think that that this presentation is going to make some people uncomfortable. And I am not sorry. Because first of all, you don't have to believe me. You don't have to buy into what I'm saying. No one does. And secondarily, because I believe that education, at least one of the purposes of education, is to make us uncomfortable. One of the goals is to make us uncomfortable, because that discomfort spurs real growth. So, anyway, I want to talk about why I think that answer, to teach the truth as the sole goal of education, has limits to the good that it can do and some harm that it can do as well. And the reason why is because it operates on a sort of promise, an unspoken promise, a promise that no one ever says this to their students. No one ever guarantees that this is, explicitly, but when you teach from a perspective that says, my job is to know the truth and then to teach you the truth, and that is what I do as a teacher, that there is a promise inherent with that, and the promise is that the world is a simple place. Essentially, when you say, here's how it goes. I know the truth, I teach you the truth, you then know the truth, you then advocate for the truth. If you promise them that, you are in essence saying the world is a simple place. I'd like to explain what that looks like. So I have a number of students who take a class. And I want to be really clear here. You cannot imagine how much I love the homeschooling community. I love it a great deal. I've taught in it for like 18 years now. They are my people. I love them so much. And I love my students. So I hope that this will not take away from that. And also, I respect the people who teach this class. I think that they do good things, and I do not see this in terms of all or nothing. But there's a prominent worldviews class that gets taught in the homeschooling community. And maybe some of the people here teach this class. If so, I hope I will not hurt your feelings. This comes from a place of love. Different people teach this class differently, and that's great. But I will often hear what students have to say about this class. They will transmit it to me. So this is also coming through a student lens, and student lenses aren't always accurate. But I'll have students essentially say things that have convinced me that in many times and circumstance, this worldviews class is not what I would call a worldviews class. It is a class that would be appropriate titled, Why Your Worldview is Better Than the Others. Why specifically the Judeo-Christian worldview is better than the others. I had a student come and tell me, hey, we were assigned 1984 as a reading for this class. I was like, awesome, great book, very challenging. If it's age appropriate, there's some content. Parents have to be thoughtful about that for sure. But if your parent feels okay with that, okay, challenging book, good. And then I was like, so why'd they do it? And they're like, well, we get assigned one book per worldview. All right, what was the worldview? Postmodernism, she says. So that was an interesting choice. An interesting choice. It made me think, okay, let's imagine that we were with a different group of homeschoolers. We were in let's say we were with a group of homeschoolers in Manhattan. And they were doing a worldviews class. And this worldviews class had a Judeo-Christian worldview. What if they had assigned A Handmaid's Tale as the reading for that class to represent the Judeo-Christian worldview? We take the worst possible version of that. And for those who are not familiar, Handmaid's Tale, it's a dystopian novel about a Christian nationalist government that's gone amok and enslaved everyone and taken over women in their bodies. So let's imagine that was assigned as a reading to represent the Judeo-Christian worldview. Would some of you think, that's a little simplistic? That's okay. Like, I can see what you're getting at here, but that does not represent my worldview accurately. You have taken the worst possible interpretation and you have used that to represent the way that I think. Are you seeing the promise of simplicity in here? When you say, I know the truth well enough that I will then tell you the truth, and then you take the truth, and then you do what you do good things with that truth, and that's the end of the conversation. Then, essentially, you are saying a few things. You're saying, well, first of all, I know the truth. Now, the question is, what about that? That's a pretty broad statement. I would hope that we all know true things. The things that we say, okay, this is true, and I know this. I certainly have things that I believe are true. There are things that I feel very confident are true. Really, really confident are true. There are things that I feel confident are true. There are things that I think are true. There are things that I'm pretty sure are true. There are things that I don't really know. And there are things I have no idea about. And there's everything on that scale. The question is, how much of what you know ended up in category number 1? I know. When we say I know the truth, is the answer I know the truth? Capital T, and everything in the world fits in that category. What political party you should belong to, or what ideology you should engage in, what the best type of career is, what the best type of education is, what the best type of everything is. Everything you know is in the category, I know the truth. If that category is large, then the world is indeed a very, very simple place, because it was not hard for you to know the truth. There's nothing you really had to wonder about. There's nothing you had to look at the other side and think, okay, well, what does this other side have to say? Is there value in what other people believe? Is it worth considering what I might gain from other people? If that category is so large that it encompasses everything that you think, then the world, you are essentially promising that the world is a simple, simple, simple place indeed. So simple that you can say, here's what postmodernism is, pure evil. And that's it. Don't need to think about it. Don't need to understand it. Don't need to wonder about it. It is just bad. Us good, them bad. Answer finished. All done. World simple. I had another. Maybe I'll just give one more. I'll give one more example here. I was interviewing a teacher who wanted to teach debate in my program many years ago, and I was talking about the point of the class, and we want to push people's perspectives. She's like, love it, love it, love it. Love critical thinking. Love making students uncomfortable. Love making them question. And I was like, okay, yeah. So that means that generally we stay neutral as debate teachers. We don't tell them what to think. We present them with questions. We push them. We let them kind of figure out what they think about that. And she was like, yeah, okay, so love critical thinking, complex world, get it, got it. But then what if a student says something wrong? Like, we fixed that, right? I was like, well, tell me about that. She's like, yeah, what if a student like me says something wrong? And especially what if they start convincing other students? What if the other students start thinking that it's wrong? What about that? Now, this is not as simple as a yes or no for me. There are things a student could say that I would correct them. If they said something inhumane to another student, I would say, we don't say that here. Sorry, you got to treat your classmates humanely. But based on the conversation we'd had, I had a pretty good sense of what she meant, I felt like. And that was, what if they told them that you should vote for the other guy? And what if people started agreeing with that? Then what? If you know the truth so well that you can essentially say to a student, replace your thinking with mine. I know. I figured it out. I know what's right. You don't yet. I'll tell you. Then you can be right like me. Then you are really promising that the world is in fact a very, very simple place. That you just get to know. And there doesn't need to be a whole lot of argument about the issue. There's a problem with that promise. The problem with the promise is that you can't deliver. It's not going to happen. That's the basic problem. Kids are going to grow up and they are going to find out that the world is as complex as the world that you live in. And that lands kids in rough situations if you made that promise. Even if you didn't mean to make the promise, it lands kids in rough situations. I'd like to give 3 outcomes that I've perceived. This is just Sam's perception. Give it credence if you want, don't if you don't. But this lands kids in, let's game out 3 scenarios. The first is that kids grow up and they find out the world is complex and they have to navigate that on their own. They have no training and that's difficult. That's the optimal outcome. They figure out how to navigate it on their own. They didn't get any help from their mentors growing up. And And that's a bath of ice cold water for them to go through. But that's the best outcome, is that they figure out how to navigate it, they become well adjusted, and they're able to operate in the real world. Second outcome. The second outcome is disillusionment. What happens the first time that someone meets someone and they're like a postmodernist? What was the basic premise behind this world is simple? What's the outcome here? If the world, let's think this out. If the world is so simple that you just get to know all the answers for sure, you don't have to ask deeper questions, you don't have to ruminate on them, you don't have to study about them, you just know all the answers. Then what about people who disagree? Why do they exist? What happened? It seems to me that there's maybe only a couple of options. Maybe I'm missing something here, but it seems to me that in that context, if the world is in fact a very, very simple place, then the only explanation for people who disagree with you is either that they are uneducated, they just are or dumb, they haven't learned, or they're stupid, or they're corrupt. They either can't know good things and the right things because they were uneducated or they were stupid people, or they purposefully are believing bad things because they are bad people. So what happens the first time that someone meets their first postmodernist and they find them to be pleasant, intelligent, decent, reasonable people? Then what? The best outcome is they learn how to figure that out and think in more complex ways on their own. The second is anger and disillusionment. They feel lied to. They were promised that the world was simple enough that they just got to know the truth. And everyone who disagreed with them was dumb or corrupt or uneducated. And when they find that not to be the case, that gets tough. I have a saying, fundamentalist in, fundamentalist out. I see this all the time with people who experience this disillusionment. When I say that, I mean essentially they were in a political party or a religion or an ideology, and they were promised this simple world, and they were fundamentalist. Fundamentalism we might define as a way of seeing the world based upon a simplistic worldview, seeing that the world is a simple place. They are a fundamentalist in their belief. They thought, I'm right, them wrong. We know, you don't. Us good, you bad. And then disillusionment hits, and one of the worst outcomes is fundamentalist in, fundamentalist out. They find that they were lied to, or in their mind they were lied to. I don't think they were actually lied to. I don't think anyone was trying to lie to them. They find that they were lied to, but they still haven't matured their thinking. They haven't yet gotten the intellectual tools to deal with the complex world. And so they're fundamentalist in, and then they're fundamentalist out. Now it's not me good, you bad. Now it's just me good, you bad, other direction. Because they haven't yet figured out how to make their thinking a little more complex. It's a difficult thing for someone to go to, and that rocks someone's world, to essentially feel like they have to flip their entire world because the promise didn't pan out. That's option number one. Option number two is entrenchment. They sort of have to buy into the idea that they were right, and we were good, and you were bad, and the world is simple, and we know the answers, and you don't, about all things, and it's super clear. So I want to give you an example of what that looks like in the real world. Let's see here. I've got two examples. So there was this really wonderful study that that was published in 2015. It was, let me get the citation here. It was published in Social, Psychological, and Personality Science, and it was titled Political Extremism Predicts Belief in Conspiracy Theories. This was a study conducted in the United States and Netherlands, and it had this really interesting outcome. What the outcome was they tested belief in a couple of conspiracies, and then they took the political spectrum left to right, and they showed that it had a smiley face. This is not the most interesting part. This is interesting. This is not the most interesting part. Had a smiling face. The further you go to the extremes politically, the more people were willing to believe in conspiracies. Now that's, to be clear, that wasn't absolutely true. The data was all over the map. That was a general trend. So there were people in the middle who believed in these conspiracies. There were people on the edges who didn't. But generally that was the trend. Now the most interesting part of the study is that they found a mediating variable. And the mediating variable is a variable. It's a third variable that explains the correlation. It explains why sometimes that happened, but sometimes that didn't happen. They were able to statistically show why. And the answer was that it depended on whether or not a person agreed with the following statement. With a few simple changes, most of society's problems could be solved very easily. Listen to that carefully. With a few simple changes, most of society's problems could be solved very easily. Think about why that has a correlation with conspiracy. The reason it has a correlation with conspiracy is because it's the only other option. If in your heart you really think the world is a simple place, and you can't believe that people don't just think what you think, they can't solve these issues that are long-standing issues across time and history, things like poverty and homelessness and violence and crime that have been with us forever. You think, oh no, I've got the answer. It's really quite simple to fix these deeply complex, very stubborn, enduring issues. If you think you've got a sure answer and it's simple, then why isn't it being done? It's not because it's complex. It's not because nobody really knows how to make it go away. It's not because different approaches might work in different ways and have trade-offs. It's not because the evidence is difficult to parse through and human observation is difficult for humans to observe everything all at the same time and to know what the best answers are. That's not it. The reason why is because there are corrupt people who want bad things in your society, and they have duped stupid people who are willing to go along with it. Hence conspiracy. If you see the world in really simplistic terms, then you sort of end up having to believe that the people around you are corrupt, evil people for disagreeing, because what other explanation is there for the reason that people disagree? So when I say that kids need to entrench as they reach those adult years and they find out maybe this is more complex, they get that same sense that I talked about before. It's too complex. There aren't any answers. Can't accept that. Got to retrench. Got to go back to it. No, the world is a simple place. And therefore, world's out to get me. Pew Research did some stunning research in 2019 about how Republicans and Democrats see each other in America. It's not encouraging. There are 3 measures that, this mirrors what I've been saying here. 3 measures that are relatively the same and then 2 that are pretty different. One is, how much do Republicans and Democrats see each other as closed-minded? This is, the deep irony of this is like, it's hard to imagine irony this deep. Anyway, 64% of Republicans say that Democrats are closed-minded. 75% of Democrats say Republicans are closed-minded. Unintelligent. 36% of Republicans say Democrats are unintelligent. 38% of Democrats say that Republicans are unintelligent. Immoral. 55% of Republicans say that Democrats are immoral, just as a group. And Democrats, 47% say Republicans are immoral. And then what's really interesting is Republicans are way more likely to call Democrats lazy. And then, Democrats are way more likely to call Republicans lazy. And then, it's actually Republicans both times. Republicans are more likely to call Democrats lazy and unpatriotic. But there's still plenty. Do you see what I'm saying? That when people entrench, they start to see the world in terms of people disagreeing because they are dumb, stupid, they have moral defects, they're just the wrong sort of people. The question is, does that hold up to scrutiny? Does that work? I mean, have you ever changed your mind on something that was very serious to you? An important issue, something that was really important to you, and your thinking on the issue evolved over time? Was earlier you unintelligent? Did they have a moral defect? Was earlier you a bad person? Do you have anybody in your life, I hope you do, who disagrees with you on a very important issue to you, and yet you respect that person? Do you see them as intelligent, reasonable, trustworthy, good people? In my career, I debate. I've been doing debate for so long. The question is, why does debate work? Why is it an enduring subject? I can tell you the answer. It's because there are meaningful, legitimate arguments on many sides of many issues. Some issues, not so much. If we say, murder good or bad, but we don't debate that one. We don't say, hey, is murder good or bad? But lots and lots of issues. There is broad room for reasonable disagreement. That's why debate works as a subject. Because the world is complex. If you've ever changed your mind on a serious issue, if you know people that you love and respect who disagree with you, if you think, reasonable people can disagree on an issue, then it points to a basic idea. The world is complex enough for that disagreement to exist. Which then means that we don't want kids sent in to adult life unprepared for that reality. We don't want them to have to figure it out on their own, flip without ever really maturing their thinking, or have to entrench and become more extreme in their view of other people. So, the question is, what do we do about that? How do we change? I would suggest that there is an additional purpose to education. Note that I am not saying a replacement, because I think I would be doing some high-level simplistic thinking myself if I were to present this as a dichotomy. We can either teach our children the truth, or we can say that the world is a complex place, but we cannot have both. In fact, we can have both. We can add to the concept that we try to teach what true things to students. We can add to that concept that a purpose of education is to help students understand the complexity of the world and be prepared to deal with that complexity, to mature their thinking in such a way that they will be ready to engage with that world in a meaningful way. So, what does that look like? I don't have a great deal of time to wrap this up. Jansen says I get 5 more minutes, and they're actually giving me 5 more minutes. I am at the end of my time. But the question is, what does it look like to add that? The first, I would say, is it starts with the teacher's own sense of intellectual humility. Starting in your mind to ask the question, can I break that basic dichotomy? I know everything, or I know nothing, and there is nothing in between. The question is, can you break that dichotomy inside of yourself? Because if you can, then the result is intellectual humility. You start to say, here are things that I am I feel strongly about. Strong enough, maybe I would be willing to transmit this to a student and say, I feel strongly about this and I really think you should think this. But there are other things that I feel pretty strongly about. And I would say, these are things that are really worth considering. Others that I feel like are good ideas, but I know that there are other competing ideas. And I might say to students, take a look at these. What do you think? What do you see going on here? Things where you say, I have no idea. And you say, students, come and learn with me. Let's explore this together. Let's figure this out. So I want to go ahead and share another thing I did with students. This was last year. We studied the Analects with my elite students. These are the writings of Confucius. So we were reading the original text of Confucianism. It was enlightening, stunning, enriching, and also very challenging. Lots and lots of students come from a highly individualistic worldview, a worldview that emphasizes your identity as an individual. And Confucianism is more or less the exact opposite of that. But it's not like I presented it to students like I was saying, you know what, students? This is right. Read this. This text will tell you how to live. Nor did I present it as saying in such a way that said, students, this text is wrong. This is not what you should believe. Instead, I said, students, what value can we gain from this text together? Let's use it as a springboard to ask interesting questions. One of the questions that we asked is I asked students to have a debate. After we've read the text, tried to understand it, discussed it, I said, all right, we're going to have a debate. I want you over here are assigned to debate this question, this side. A person's identity is better defined as part of a community than as an individual. Your job is to debate that a person's identity is better understood as an individual than as a part of a community. Debate this together. And then at the end, I said, all right, students, after this, I want you to raise your hand. 1 means, I think that a person should be defined as an individual alone. That's it. That's all they are. Their community doesn't matter. On the complete other side, 10 means that people are communities. Their individual identity is moot, unimportant. And then I said, students, let's see where you landed. And they raised their hands as I counted. 1, 2, 3, 4. No one said 1. No one said 10. And then students sort of found themselves somewhere in the middle. That says to me, students are capable of complex thinking. They are able to draw meaningful truths out of a text without buying the entire thing as a whole. They are able to learn that the world is complex and be better prepared to deal in that complex world. And it doesn't have to take away from their sense that there are true things in life that they should stand by, values that are important to them and that they should fight for. But it does deepen that picture, and it makes them more prepared to deal with the world as it actually is. This is my hope as a teacher, that I can help my students prepare to live in that world, because that world is coming for them, whether they want it to or not. I hope that that's something that we can reach for, all of us in the homeschooling community. Thank you so much for your time today. You're wonderful people, and that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.